Awesome. Well, hello there. My name is Charlie Bonner. I'm the communications director here at Move Texas. Welcome to another riveting session of Move University Social Justice for Social Distancing. I hope that you all are staying safe and washing your hands and all of those great things. Today, I am joined by a special guest, Michelle Tremillo, the executive director at the Texas Organizing Project. Michelle, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Doing all right. Are you
Over
you're in the
here.
work from home life too? Do you have are you staying sane? What are you doing to take care of yourself?
Lots of long walks around the neighborhood.
I think that's a solid response. That's what I'm trying to do when I'm not live streaming. I'm trying to get out there and keep walking and all that good stuff. So hopefully I'll take some advice from you. But I'd love to just dive in today. Today, we're going to be talking about paid sick and how critical that is. TOP has been a great leader in this fight, and Move has been involved in a long time in San Antonio. Can you give me a little bit of background just to set the conversation of what is paid sick leave? I think a lot of people don't know or might have some misconceptions about it.
Sure. If you don't mind, I think I'll just start a little bit with just some background on our organization.
Yeah, please, that'd be
Those
great.
people watching who maybe don't know as much about our organization as they do yours.
Yeah, no, that'd be
Uh,
amazing.
so Texas Organizing Project, we're a multi-issue membership-based organization. At TOP, we like to say we fight
Well,
with two
hello
fists.
there. My name is Troy.
We we engage in year-round community organizing on a racial and economic justice agenda, focusing on issues like improving public schools, housing justice, criminal justice reform, immigrant rights, economic justice issues like paid sick leave, um, and access to health care. And our second fist is our political power fist, and that is running large scale voter mobilization
Mhm.
programs at election time to ensure that the majority of us become voters, and that our values and our priorities are reflected in who gets elected to office. So, paid sick leave, I think, young people know just as well as people who've been in the workforce for 30, 40 years that, there are not a lot of protections for workers.
Mhm.
And, here in Texas, our minimum wage is the same as the federal minimum wage, which hasn't increased in a very long time. And so, paid sick leave is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's the ability to take time off when you or a loved one gets sick, and to care for yourself. The paid sick leave ordinances that we have worked so hard for here in Texas, they also include provisions for instances of domestic violence or rape. And so, it also covers being able to take time off to take care of yourself in those
Mhm.
instances as well.
I think that's a great overview. I really appreciate that, and it's really come to the forefront right now. I think we're hearing a lot more about paid sick, who has it, who doesn't. Um, what is kind of the state of paid sick right now for Texans? Where who has protections, who doesn't? Because we don't have any statewide coverage right now.
Correct. Yes. So, in the state of Texas, we essentially live in apartheid-like conditions here, right? The uh, Who governs us is a small minority of old white conservative men, mostly, who have all of the control in the state, and really oppress the majority of us who live in this state. And so, they're not at all reflective of the majority of us that live here. So there are very few um, protections for working families at all in Texas. I mean, nothing more
Yeah.
than what is required by the federal law. So, Because we need to do some real work to register voters, like our good friends at Move Texas do, and then also to mobilize
Mhm.
voters at election time in order to change who's in power in our state. In the meantime, we focus on the major metro areas um, where we can, in fact, pass progressive
Yeah.
policies like basically, right? So a broad coalition of groups, labor, community, policy groups, worked together over the course of a year to bring paid sick leave ordinances to Austin. Austin became the first city in the South to pass a paid sick leave ordinance.
I didn't know
San
that.
Antonio became the second, and then Dallas became the third. And Austin's was tied up in a lawsuit very quickly, um, as what in San Antonio also. Dallas actually had been in effect until March 31st, I believe. Enforcement was scheduled to go into effect on April 1st last week, when a judge issued an injunction. So right now, all three ordinances are tied up in a legal battle.
Interesting. So really no Texans right now have the under ordinance the access to paid sick. They might if your company require, already gives that to you as a benefit, but right now by statute, no one in Texas is benefiting from this.
Yeah, it's not a requirement that any business operating in Texas gives paid sick leave or offers paid sick leave. Yeah, it's not a requirement anywhere in Texas. So it's
Interesting.
up to the
Interesting.
individual employer.
Yeah. And I will say we have lots of great folks tuning in right now. If you have any questions, I have some more questions here, but be sure that you can ask your questions in the comments, or you can also tweet them at move_Texas, and we'll loop those in for Michelle as well. Who's really been behind these efforts to expand access to paid sick? Because I think it's really been a broad coalition, lots of folks working together for the first time. Can you tell me a little bit about that coalition work? Because I think that's such a critical part of this narrative.
Sure, and hopefully I don't forget
I'm
anybody
like,
by
we don't have to
name.
name.
If
We don't
I
have to.
well, if I do, I'm sorry. It's because I'm nervous.
They're broad
I know
coalitions.
this is
They're
my
broad
first time
coalitions.
ever being on Facebook Live. So I mean, it's a broad coalition of labor organizations. The state AFL, um, Unite Here, you know, several labor unions, and then community groups like Move and Top and the Workers Defense Project, and many other. Each city had a broad coalition
Mhm.
of groups. Each of our coalitions also include small business owners themselves, who believe that this is a good policy and that all employers should have to provide paid sick leave. Um, and then, we've had some local elected officials that have been champions for the work as well.
Yeah, they've definitely been critical partners in this. But I think, like so many aspects of the social justice work that we all focus on, COVID-19 has really put a spotlight on the inequities in the system. And paid sick, I think, is one of the best examples that we have of this, because so many of us benefit from being able to either take time off or work from home, but working folks don't benefit from those policies, and especially in a place like Texas. So can you talk to me a little bit about why policies like paid sick are so critical, particularly right now, in the healthcare crisis that we're in?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we're having a lot of conversations about social distancing,
Mhm.
about if somebody is unfortunate enough to catch, COVID-19, then they have to quarantine for 14 days.
Mhm.
If you were possibly exposed, even if you don't have symptoms, they're asking people to quarantine for 14 days. So if you think about what it requires of us to be um, good human beings
Yeah,
who care for each other, right? That for too many of us, it also means going without a paycheck, right? So
yeah.
people are having to make really horrible decisions. And this is true. This was true before COVID-19.
Mhm.
what I hope is that, our country, our state, it will look at what has happened, and, we can choose to be a different country after COVID-19, right? So even before
Yeah.
COVID-19, if you were sick, or someone that you love, your spouse, your mother, your father, your child were sick, you had a really hard choice to make, right? Do I
Mhm.
go to work, or do I stay home and take care of myself, or take care of my loved one and go without a paycheck?
Mhm.
Go without groceries, not be able to pay my rent. I mean, these are very, um, you know, critical life choices
Yeah.
for too many working families. And so it's just that much more exacerbated in a COVID-19 situation, where you might have to quarantine yourself whether or not you're sick, right? And
Mhm.
you, and, you know, I mean, we're also not just going through a public health crisis, but going through an economic crisis right
Yeah.
now. Like, many people have lost their jobs. Those of us who are fortunate to be able to work from home, or who are essential workers. And let's be real about the majority of the essential workers right now, are some of the lowest
Yeah.
paid workers. And this demonstrates for you, why we have to have, um, a real focus on working families, and a real focus on, one job,
Mhm.
with benefits should be enough,
Yeah.
right? We should all be able to take care of ourselves and our families on one job, and that all work, should be respected, and that we all deserve dignity, and that we're all worthy. And, um, hopefully we can come through the COVID-19 crisis and emerge. I think those of us who do this, community organizing work together, right, we can emerge bolder and ready to fight for what we deserve, right?
Yeah.
Because this has just really a bright light on, um, just how horrible it is to put our families in this position where we have to choose between life or a paycheck.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it is interesting. I think the community organizing side is so interesting because we think of community organizing in very traditional terms, right? Like in our town halls and things like that. And I feel many of us feel so connected to the community by this crisis, even though we are apart. And it's in I think we're seeing so much of how we affect each other, which it'll be interesting to see how that affects organizing going on. But that's another conversation. We have a couple good questions coming in on Facebook Live. This great one from Samantha. What would you suggest the first steps be for someone looking to get this policy passed in their community? So maybe you're outside of those metro areas that we have already talked about where this policy has already been passed and it's tied up. What are some good first steps for trying to pass a policy like this in your community?
Yeah, I mean, I think, policies pass because there is the political will to get them passed, right? So I think the most important thing is that, um, we have to demonstrate, um, the will, right?
Mhm.
And the only tool that we have to do that is our people power, right? It is to, um, build in our own community to make the case for why this is important. Um, it's helpful to identify, uh, a city council member who you think will champion,
Mhm.
um, the issue. But, if you remember in Austin, um, there was a great, sort of synergy between the community and the labor and the policy groups that came together behind this issue, and, real energy for it on the city council, right? And so they were able to pass it, um, through that kind of a partnership, and bring in the small business community to, help, finalize what that policy would look like. In San Antonio and Dallas, what we did is we took that Austin ordinance, understanding from the get-go that there would not be that kind of partnership between community and our local government, right? So we took that ordinance and slapped it onto a petition. And actually, in San Antonio, we needed to collect a little over 70,000 signatures. We ended up collecting 144,000 signatures. That's a big undertaking. Can't necessarily do that with volunteers alone. But that is one way to do it in your city, right? If there's really going to be a void of leadership among your elected officials, that was how we were able to force it onto the agenda. That's how we did it in San Antonio. And then, Dallas, we had a hard time. The petition, the requirements there were different than in San Antonio. And so in the end, we fell just a few signatures short. So we could not force it through the city council, but they actually brought it back up on their own just a few months later, right? Like that did create the conditions under which there became the political will among the city council itself. So
it still showed the people power, even if it didn't meet that technical threshold.
Right. And so that is, you have to have both. And when you don't have both, the way that you force it to happen is through the community demand.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so interesting that we have these three major cities that have these three different fights, and they were all really different organizing strategies based on the political will there and things like that. So thank you, Samantha, for that question. I think really we can distill it down to like identifying your allies and then like showing that people power in whatever way that is to give those allies some cover. Another great question.
We did engaging with business owners who agree it was also critical in each of the three cities as well.
I think that piggybacks great onto Alyssa's question here from the Facebook stream. She said, what are some of the misconceptions about paid sick? I think one of them that I've definitely heard is that there are business owners involved. So you've already dispelled that misconception. What are some others?
Yeah, I think that there are, first of all, I think a lot of what you hear from the corporate opposition is that it will kill small businesses. And, paid sick leave exists in at least 40 other jurisdictions. Some of those are statewide, and then some of them are cities. And in no place has paid sick leave been shown to hurt the economy, right? That is a myth. We have data to support that it is, in fact, economies continue to thrive. I think, unfortunately, there's a prevailing narrative out there about lazy workers, right? And I think, it's highly insulting to to all of us. And, it's just not true, right? It just isn't true. The overwhelming majority of people want to go to work and do a good job every day. And they don't overuse the paid sick leave. In fact, again, studies that have been conducted post passing these kinds of policies show that most people don't use all of the paid time off that they've accrued, because they in fact want to save it in case there's a real, emergency situation down the line, right? So people are very responsible with the paid sick leave that they have. And, I think, our side is just not shared. Our side is just not told, right? And so I think those are two of the big ones, right? That it's a job killer. It's just absolutely not true. And that it's, you're opening yourselves up to abuse. And again, that's just absolutely not true.
Yeah, that's just not what we have seen. And I think
that's not to say that no one ever abuses it.
Of course.
It's to say, in the same way that, um, everything works, right? I mean, there are,
Yeah.
there's a lot of white collar crime, like there's
Yeah.
just, you can't say no because someone somewhere is going to abuse it, right?
Yeah.
You have to be thinking about the whole and what is best for us. Um, and what is best for us is that everybody gets to take care of themselves
Yeah.
when they or a family member is sick, right? Period. It doesn't matter what kind of job you have. Everyone should be able to have that.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Another great question from Teresa. Um, what is the status of the paid sick court battle going on right now? This might be a little bit complicated, the question, so we don't have to dig too deep into it because there are several. So it's kind of the
Sure.
short answer.
Yeah.
But if we want to
No.
talk a little bit about the fight in courts, we can definitely do that.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, I'm not an attorney. I feel like I have to say that up front. I need a little
Nice.
disclaimer
A
at the bottom.
banner.
I'm not an attorney. Um, and our lovely friends at the Texas Civil Rights Project, I should give them a shout out, are, representing us in the court case. And, so basically, there has been an injunction filed in all three cities that says, like, until the merits of the case have been heard, we're going to stop it from going into effect, right? So there have been no actual legal arguments,
Mhm.
and the argument is that, this may be a little too in the weeds. We have a Texas minimum law. Um, there's a, and so they're saying that this is essentially a wage, not a benefit, right? So our argument is that it's a benefit. Their argument is that it's a wage. And so that argument has not happened in court
Mhm.
yet. There simply have been appeals for these injunctions, right? So, um, the merits of the case have not actually been argued anywhere.
And with COVID
And if
19
we could argue
happening,
them, we would
yeah,
win.
exactly, exactly. I think everything's a little bit on hold right now. Extraordinarily unfortunate, while so many people need access right
Yes.
now. So thank you for that question as well. One of the other things that I want to know, we've talked a little bit about business and that kind of opposition. How do we fight back against those false narratives that the opposition has put out? What was been working? What has Top been doing to fight back?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's several things that we need to do, right? I mean, I think in the short term, we need to continue to be unapologetic in demanding that, we have paid sick leave. So whether that is, many of our coalition partners have called for all of these, business interests that have sued to stop our ordinances from going into effect. We've all called for them to drop their lawsuit, right? If you drop your lawsuit, then our cities are covered. They
Mhm.
have paid sick leave going forward. I think that, there's also emergency sick leave provisions that we could be pushing. There's some paid sick leave in
The
the federal
Federal Act,
stimulus
yeah.
that's happening, right? But there are, large groups of employees who are not covered,
Yeah.
right? Like there are very large companies are exempt from providing the emergency sick leave, and then very small companies are exempt, right? So, um, there's still many workers who will not have paid sick leave, under this. So I think, we can push for emergency sick leave ordinances for the time that we are, in this crisis. And then, quite frankly, our best bet, um, is to, uh, grow our electorate, to increase voter registration, to get all of the young people who are out there watching. Um, we all need to start voting in our numbers, right? We are the majority of this state. We have to be reflective in who is voting. Like we we have to get a new governor. We have to get a new state legislature. And the only way to do that is by showing up at the polls. That's how we get new leadership. And then we can pass this as a statewide law.
Mhm. And ensure that we're not getting caught up in these court battles. We're not seeing delays or changes in city council that could take it away. We need to enshrine this in statute so that everyone can be guaranteed these protections. I think that's a really great point to add to this. And I think on to that point, how do we make sure that we keep up this momentum? There's been a ton of press about paid sick leave right now, maybe more so than ever before. Um, how do we keep up this fight when folks are back at work, when thankfully we can leave our homes again, hopefully sooner than later? I'm losing it already. How do we make sure that these insights that we're getting aren't lost?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it really becomes, I mean, I think like right now we have you know, there is a moment where we are seeing, you know, just um, how little of a safety net we have, just how
Yeah.
little we prioritize um, making sure that all of us thrive, right? So we have to continue to hold on to that, right? And we have to continue to, you know, I think it's great whoever is watching is getting involved. You know, when we can um, do more, uh, you know, from when we can get back out into the streets,
Yeah.
you know, like we need to really show up in force, right? Like
Yeah.
we do, you know, there is obviously a certain amount of pressuring our elected officials to do more that we can do on social media, from home. But, you know, we have to be relentless, right? We cannot let uh, this lesson um, be forgotten. We cannot, you know, we know that we deserve more and we have to keep fighting for it. You know, we have to, um, you know, if the case has ever been made that voting matters and who is in charge in a crisis matters, it has been proven to us here. And so, you know, we have to continue to center people, right? You know, if you watch the conversations that are happening, you know, there's a lot of concern about businesses that have had to close. And there's a lot of sympathy for businesses that have had to close or temporarily lay people off. And, you know, we have to remember that um, this economy depends on our labor, right? And that we are who should be centered, right? We should be talking about helping those businesses that recognize that their employees are the reason that they can earn a profit,
Yeah.
right? So we just shouldn't save all businesses, right?
Yeah.
um, we should be focusing on our people first, and where, you know, we have to flip this idea of like we have to save the businesses so that people will have work, right? We have to make sure that we're investing in creating jobs that are worthy of us.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a very important shift in how we think about it, right?
Yeah.
That
And this
anything,
is such a critical time to shift that
yeah,
narrative too.
right? Like, let's be clear, our government is going to pour a lot of money into helping businesses bounce back. And they can choose to just pour it into whoever, or they can choose to pour it into, you know, businesses that are going to provide living wages with benefits and, um, you know, or they can give it to somebody who doesn't give a crap about their employees,
Yeah.
right? Like our government has a choice in how they invest that money. And at a bare minimum, we have to be requiring that any use of, these are our taxpayer dollars, right? Any use of those funds has to create jobs that are worthy of us. And I think that's a very critical distinction and something that we have to remember at all times. Not all jobs are worth saving.
Mhm. I think that's great. And it feeds in. My favorite like meme that I've been seeing around lately is like that's the new interview question after this is what did you do to take care of your employees?
Mm-hmm.
It's not what's your workplace culture. It's when it mattered, what did you do to take care of your people?
Yes.
And making sure that we're saving the jobs that are worthy of us. I love that. One last question. We're wrapping up on our time here. One of the parts of this project, Move University, that we've been doing is giving folks recommendations of things to do to pass the time. So,
Mhm.
any book or movie recommendations for our friends watching that you wanna pitch?
Oh, okay, yeah, I have a few. But before I do that, so first of all, anytime that I do anything move related or paid sick leave San Antonio related, I always give a shout out to my dear friend Alex Burnell. So I just want to make sure that I do that before our time is up.
He's watching. He's
I'm
watching.
I'm sure he is, and he will know if I gave him a shout out or not. Okay, so I have two recommendations. So one is a book called Democracy in Chains.
Okay.
Very, very important. The Deep History of the Radical Right's Stealth Plan for America. Everybody needs to read that. It's very scary. And then Maria, Daughter of Immigrants. So Maria Berriosaval, who is a San Antonian former city councilwoman. She ran for mayor. She recently gave me her autobiography. So I've started reading that. And then for fun, if you like romance novels, The Wedding Date
Oh, I've
by
heard good things. I've heard good things.
Jasmine Gilroy. Yes. So, I make a point of supporting authors of color. So she's a
Oh, awesome.
awesome Black woman author. It's actually a series. This is the first one. I'm waiting to read the fourth one.
You're
Um,
ready.
it is, it is romance, but it's a fun read. And in between reading about the history of democracy or lack of democracy in our country, it's a fun break from
Yeah.
the heavy stuff.
Well, I love that. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing so many insights. We'll make sure that we include those recommendations. On Twitter, we have our own recommendations that we'll publish right after this. So thank you again. Thank you everyone for watching. We will be
Thank you
having
so
more of
much.
these. So there's lots of more opportunities to learn great things about social justice. So stay tuned to our social media and stay safe and wash your hands. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.